Good morning. We're here to announce charges in several cases. The first being really egregious case in the heartbreaking murder of a 12-year-old little girl from earlier this year. We are charging 22-year-old Malik Parrish and 20-year-old Abdul Ali, A-L-I. Both face one count of felony first-degree murder charges in this homicide that occurred in the 2300 block of West 72nd Street on March 1st this year, 2022. That's in our 8th district. If you recall this case, 12-year-old girl was inside a vehicle with her family returning from celebrating her 12th birthday. The family heard gunshots and realized the 12-year-old had been shot in the head. She was taken to the hospital where she succumbed to her injuries. Area 1 detectives immediately began their investigation after this incident, and they utilized surveillance video that showed 3 male offenders were shooting at another vehicle and when the victim and their family were driving by. Area 1 detective pieced together video footage of this incident and released it to the public for tips or any other leads. Area 1 detectives, CPD's Office of Community Policing, Mr. Andrew Holmes, who's standing here with me today, and Crime Stoppers all helped in putting out flyers, talking to people in the community, developing the effort to get the tips necessary to break this case. Following months of investigations and the help of Andrew and Crime Stoppers and others in the community, that led us to identifying these 2 offenders. Both Parrish and Ali were placed into custody on November 27th of this month and charged. In addition to first-degree murder charges, Parrish has also been charged with 1 felony count of possession of a stolen motor vehicle, and Ali has been charged with an additional charge of felony aggravated unlawful use of a weapon and 1 misdemeanor count of criminal trespass to vehicle, basically being in a stolen car. Parrish, not surprisingly, is a convicted felon and has had 11 total arrests. He was convicted of possession of a stolen motor vehicle in October of last year, 2021. Ali has had 4 prior arrests. I want to thank the hard work of Area 1 homicide detectives who worked tirelessly to bring some measure of peace to the victim's family and ensure that these offenders were brought to justice. I also want to thank community partners like Andrew Holmes and others who were out canvassing for information in the days following this tragedy, and the community members who came forward with vital information that broke this case. I want to ask everyone to continue praying for this family, the family of a 12-year-old who have had to endure the worst of times. Let's also remember the 12-year-old in our prayers and honor her. She had a whole life ahead of her, and it was taken by senseless gun violence. I also want to update on a couple of other cases that have led to arrest and charges. Recently, on November 23rd of this month, a 15-year-old male was arrested and charged with felony robbery, felony vehicle hijacking, and felony possession of a stolen motor vehicle. So 15-year-old robbed someone, carjacked someone, and was also in possession of a stolen motor vehicle. He was arrested by our vehicular hijacking task force officers, and he was observed in a car driving the wrong way down a one-way street in the 8,000 block of South Vernon. Officers ran that license plate, determined that the car was stolen in a carjacking. Officers placed this 15-year-old in custody, and he was charged accordingly. And next, we have an offender charged with theft of a large sum. A 60-year-old, Sharon Carabine Derringer, that's her last name is hyphenated, C-A-R-A-B, like boy, I-N-E, hyphen, D like David, I-E-R-B, like boy, E-R-G-E-R. Sharon was arrested on November 28th this past week, and charged with one felony count of theft of a large amount. She was arrested after being identified as the individual who took a bag of containing cash from an armored truck in the 5700 block of North Broadway in the 20th District. She was placed in custody and charged with felony theft. Two more cases. One being Shamar, S-H-A-M-A-R, Washington, 21-year-old, was arrested on November 28th and charged with one felony count of aggravated vehicular hijacking with a firearm and one felony count of armed robbery with a firearm. He was arrested after being identified as the offender who took a vehicle at gunpoint from a 41-year-old female victim in the 700 block of South Ada, ADA Street in the 12th District on June 22nd, 2022. And then the last case is 46-year-old Harry Bowen, B-O-W-E-N, was arrested on November 26th, 2022, and charged with one felony count of first-degree murder. He was arrested after being identified as the offender who moments earlier shot and killed a 60-year-old male victim in the 7800 block of South Honore Street, H-O-N-O-R-E, in the 6th District. And before we open it up for questions, I just want to acknowledge the really hard work of all of our detectives who worked tirelessly to break these cases. It's very difficult work. They work around the clock, many times working multiple shifts without breaks when they get hot leads. But we really want to acknowledge their work, as well as the result of their work along with all of our officers in the Chicago Police Department led to this year's 15% decline in homicides. That's 15% decline in homicides, and a 19% decline in shootings, as well as a 8% decline in carjackings this year. And with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Morning. This is Maria Barolesa from Univision. My question is in regards to the man found shot in the face in the Little Village neighborhood. So I have a few questions in regards to that. Has it been identified? And if it's a gang-related incident?
So you don't have any on-topic questions at all on any of these cases that we just talked about?
No.
So we'll get with you offline on the off-topic questions, if you don't mind. We'll update you on those cases.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good morning, Superintendent. Charlie Wojciechowski from Channel 5.
Yep.
You'd mentioned there were 3 people involved in the car with the shooting of the 12-year-old girl. Third still at large, or was he determined not to be involved?
Still at large and still an ongoing investigation. So we hopefully will update you on that third person.
A second question on the armored car theft. Can you describe the circumstances? Was this a robbery of the truck, or did you just walk by and grab a bag?
This was a robbery that included grabbing the bag. But all money's not good money. We all know that. And there's no free money out there. So it's a theft, and she'll be charged with a felony count of theft.
One more, but I'll turn it over to.
Okay, go ahead with it.
It's actually, there's a consent decree hearing today going on. Give us an update on where you think the department stands with regard to the federal consent decree, progress you're making, and what still needs to be done.
I'll talk a little bit about some of the progress we're making, and then I also want to mention some of the challenges we have. Some of the progress we're making, obviously, in the independent monitoring report period 1, we started out with 11% compliance. And we just concluded the independent monitoring period 6. So these last 2.5 years, we've gone from 11% to IMR 6, what we believe will be over 77% compliance Most of that compliance is preliminary compliance. Some of it is secondary compliance, and we are working to continue to progress on operational compliance, which is the most difficult compliance. Some of the challenges ahead, even though we've gone from 11 to 77 in 2.5 years, are obviously we need to update our technological infrastructure so that we can have data integrity. We have old infrastructure that we're upgrading through a new computer-aided dispatch system that's coming online hopefully next year, and a new records management system that's in request for proposals that we hope will come online sometime in the next 12 to 18 months. In addition, obviously, our staffing levels are important for us to achieve compliance. I think the monitor is going to identify that as a challenge for us. This year, will on pace to close out the year with 1,000 new recruits hired. That's the most since the 2017, 2018 years of hiring, as well as making sure that our supervisor, particularly our sergeant rank ratio to police officer, is 1 to 10, which is the recommended ratio. So we have enough oversight supervisors on the ground for our officers to ensure compliance with our policies. We are on pace to meet our 40 hours of requirement for training for every officer on the department. We actually are ahead of schedule for that. So that has been an expressed concern before on our commitment, whether we meet our training goals for the second year, and we will. We're ahead of pace. But again, technological upgrades, infrastructure upgrades around technology is going to be really important, critical, as well as hiring more officers, keeping pace with attrition, which we did this year, but we still got a lot of catching up to do, as well as having enough sergeants on the ground to ensure our policies are being followed. Next question.
Hi there, Superintendent. Evelyn Holmes from Channel 7. What was the pivotal turning point that allowed you to locate these individuals and arrest them? That's the first question.
Good question. I have that answer, but I want to bring up Chief Dinahan to really expand on that and give these detectives a lot of credit, because this was a very difficult case to break. Needed a lot of help, not just video help, but help from the community. Brendan.
Thanks, boss. So to answer your question, the pivotal point was an anonymous witness coming forward and giving us information. So I know the soup kind of touched on it, and we talk a lot about the technology, and we talk a lot about the video, and the detectives had worked extremely hard on trying to identify who these individuals were. And the soup actually mentioned Crime Stoppers was out there, George McDade, Andrew Holmes was out there. We actually produced a YouTube video that I think many of the news media that produced and put out there, and none of that in the beginning generated any leads. So the really pivotal point is we received an anonymous witness from the community, as the soup mentioned, gave us some information, which allowed us to move forward and then build a stronger case and then work with the state's attorney's office in order to do this. So I think it's pretty important, because we talk so much about the technology, but we always, we need somebody from the community, from inside, to help us out and point us in the right direction.
What was obviously, I'm assuming, this girl is in the car with her family, they're driving by, they're not the intended target. What was was there some ongoing beef? What was the motivation for them opening fire in the first place?
So they were, the soup mentioned that they were actually firing at another car. So they saw this other car. There's ongoing disputes in this specific area, and when they saw this other car, these individuals felt this other car may be an offending group, so they chose to fire at this separate car, and then the stray bullet hits this poor 12-year-old, as the soup mentioned, just finished celebrating her birthday with her family. So one of these individuals did give a confession, but they're shooting at a rival group.
Now, last question that I'll pass along, just so I'm clear. So this Malik Parrish, and is that P-A-R-R-I-S-H?
It's P-A-R-I-S-H.
Okay, one R. Okay. Now, he's a convicted felon, correct, with 11 arrests?
Correct.
What about Ali? Is he a convicted felon as well?
Ali he currently has an aggravated gun case that is pending in court. Correct.
Morning, Superintendent Sean Lewis.
Before we go to your question, I just want to expand on your line of questioning. I think it's quite appropriate. These are violent people, and their history, criminal history, shown them to be violent. We need to throw the book at these people. They need to be held to the highest extent that the law allows in our court system. And we need to look at our risk assessments in court when we're releasing these people on aggravated gun charges, back to these communities pending trial. Some need to be deemed violent and a harm to the community. Individuals, from a retaliation standpoint, this rivalry between these groups, we can do those assessments if we work together with the courts and the prosecutors and hold people to trial and potentially save lives. And so I really want to make that point clear that, you know, these two offenders need to be held to the highest standard of the law, but also identify earlier as a danger to the community with different consequences in court when they come to court with a gun charge. Thanks.
Morning, Superintendent Sean Lewis from WGN. Evelyn did have one follow-up, and that was for the stealing of the car, October of last year. Was that what that was?
Yes.
Okay. Could you talk about the importance, first of all, you had announced in March the $15,000 reward. Is this anonymous tip in line to get that?
Yes.
If there's a conviction?
Yes.
Talk about
$10,000 if there's charges, so they're going to get something.
Talk about, I know Dinahan spoke about this, but talk about in your words how important it is still, even with all of the technology that you have at your disposal, to get those calls and get those tips.
Sure, and you know, I kind of glossed over our compliance progress. That means we're building trust. Going from 11% to 77% are just statistical data sets. But what really lets you know that you're starting to build trust in the community is when people trust you enough to give you information that can be acted on in a legal way to bring violent offenders into custody. So there's a connecting the dots on this compliance with the consent decree. It actually helps us build trust in the community. But one of the big clues of whether or not you're actually getting to that point of having people trust you is when people come forward and give you information about what's happening from a gun violence perspective. So that is really important to continue to build on, not be satisfied with just a statistical significant improvement, but also getting the information from the community because they trust you more.
Being in law enforcement as long as you have, when you look at a 22-year-old with a long criminal history and a 20-year-old also with a criminal history, what does that say to you? Where's the failure there? Because when I was 22, man, I don't know if I...
Yeah, it's consequences. It's personal responsibility and it's consequences in our court system. You know, the revolving door of our court systems these last several years just hadn't created the consequences. I know we're seeing this across the country, not just in Chicago. I think there's some movement of the needle back to more consequences in the courts for violent offenders. And, you know, hopefully Chicago gets there sooner rather than later.
I'm Jordan Anderson from the Chicago Tribune. I think a lot of my questions have already been addressed, so I guess I just wanted to ask, is there anything else you would want the community in Chicago to know about this case and the police work on this case?
That we'll never give up pursuing justice for these victims of such senseless gun violence, particularly when it involves young people. It's so tragic. It tears at our heart as you know, we're all fathers and family members. We have young people in our lives that we love, and we take it to heart when a young person is senselessly killed in the way, celebrating their birthday, coming home with her family, and this happens. And now this family is changed for forever. And so we want to just bring some sense of closure to this family. You know, these last several months have been horrible because these offenders have been out there feeling like they got away with it. But I just want to make it clear to these offenders who do these kinds of acts, we will find you. We'll use every resource that we have to bring you to justice. Thanks. Oh, Charlotte. Yep.
Yeah, Andrew, you're out there in the community all the time. You talk to people. The superintendent mentioned that there's an increasing level of trust between the community and the police force. Is that something you sense? And also, have you talked to the family of the 12-year-old, and what are they saying about the arrest right now?
Yeah, I did speak with the mother a few times this morning. She just wanted me to give a thanks to the Chicago Police Department for constantly working on this case, even though their hearts are still broken. But, you know, there's not too much relief there with her. She just want to thank Chicago Police Department to get them off the streets, stopping them from shooting somebody else. And on the other hand, as far as trust, yeah, there's a trust factor with the Chicago Police Department. You know, people are tired. The community is tired. So they're not turning their heads anymore. They're giving up the information, feeding it to the detectives. And one thing I can tell you, and one thing I can tell those who are making the wrong decision, Chicago Police Department will not stop tracking you. Think about it.